Good afternoon and welcome to the Palos Verdes Land Conservancy November walk. We are at Bluff Cove in Palos Verdes Estates, which is part of Palos Verdes Estates Shoreline Park, which goes actually from Malaga Cove down there all the way to Lunada Bay. Much of the cliff top is preserved, and this happened already in 1969. The city decided that that would be a good thing to have. And they were incorporated. Palos Verdes Estate was incorporated in 1939, and at that time it was considering parkland. The county was trying to forgive them back taxes and said, well, if you pay your taxes, we'll give you this land. But Palos Verdes Estate's residents decided no, they didn't want to deal with the county. So they waited, and then eventually they did get their parkland. And so, as you know, this is very nice and always on top of cliffs, and we have wonderful views. So we thought we'd start with that, and we're going to walk down to the beach. And if you wish to stay, for instance, this young man here, and explore the tide pools, that's wonderful. That's why we do this, so that you can do it. Also, as we walk down on that rock out there, you can see a lot of seals. It's covered with seals today. But if you do explore the tide pools, please don't take anything. It's like everywhere else in nature preserves. You look, you can even touch, but don't take anything with you, so that the next people can also enjoy it. My name is Anko Rao. I'm on the board of the Palos Verdes Land Conservancy, and I'm going to have to tell you about the Conservancy as we go along. How many of you are members of the Conservancy? Okay, and welcome, and let's mosey down the hill, shall we?
What is your name again?
Anke.
Anke.
Okay, yep. Hang on to my hat here. All right, we stopped here just to give you a really good view why Bluff Cove is such a popular surfing cove, and it has been for many, many years, since the early 20s. You see these gentle swells going in. Perhaps for beginners or whatever, that isn't too threatening, but for the experts, if you go further out towards the point there, there can be really high waves, particularly during stormy times, and it's very popular. And the locals, according to the paper, jealously guard their Bluff Cove, but obviously, everybody that can would come here. Just the way this cove is situated, that's what happens. We also frequently find fossils here, if we're lucky, among the rocks and at low tide. And we always try to come to these areas at low tide, because when we have families, so that they can explore the tide pools, and or anybody actually. And it's just pretty. The seals out there, everybody has seen the rock with the seals on them out there. And what we're looking down below is the black stuff is lava, that comes out when the tide is low. And what we look at behind us, where this man is going to fall off the cliff any minute, and these families climbing up these very steep trails with small children, which always amazes me, is basically the exposed peninsula rock, and very weathered because of the exposure that it has here. And when it's sort of this rusty color, that's just the iron that comes out with the combination with the sea air and the corrosion and so forth. And it's also very crumbly, as you can see, and certainly not very safe to climb around on, but that's what people do. You see a little bit of the layering because the peninsula, of course, was lifted out of the ocean. And at one time, the Palos Verdes Peninsula was under the ocean, many millions of years ago. Then, as the ice reformed on the polar caps, the ocean went down again, but also the land rose because of volcanic activities. And so the combination first made Palos Verdes Peninsula an island, another channel island. And eventually, over the course of millions of years, it drained the LA Basin, and then we were a peninsula off the LA Basin. The LA Basin basically filled up, not only because of the lifting, but because the rivers in the mountains brought down debris, and that's why it's called an alluvial plain. So thousands of years ago, it was a plain which I always imagined to be look like African, where animals were grazing by the thousands, covered in mostly in grassland. The greenery came only closer to the ocean and around the peninsula. When the first explorers came, the area from San Pedro Bay, or nowadays San Pedro, but San Pedro Bay was basically an estuary. And the channels of the estuary went all the way around the peninsula to Redondo Beach, and the inhabitants, the early inhabitants, the Indians, could actually paddle their canoes all the way around. We think that's why it was also called Palos Verdes, or green sticks, because there must have been an awful lot of greenery, willows on the side of these little waterways, great flocks of ducks and all kinds of seabirds, and it must have been really spectacular. We also think it's most likely there were areas of forest, as California forests go, mostly oak trees, because in the early days, when there were up to 79,000 head of cattle being grazed on the peninsula in the 17 and 1800s, their major export was animal hides, cow hides. And in order to tan the hides, you have to have the tannin from the oak trees. So it is believed that they chopped down the oak trees not only to heat in the process of tanning and also withdrawing whale oil, that they needed to fire up the oven, so they used the wood, but also the tannin from the oak trees, and they disappeared. And there's no really good record to say where they were exactly and how many and so forth. But it's always kind of interesting. And if you're interested in Palos Verdes history, the library up on the peninsula has a very good history room with a lot of old photos and things like that. And it's really fun to research that and look at the old days. There's some really good books out. Augusta Fink wrote a book in the 60s about the peninsula, and called Time in the Terraced Land, and she has lots and lots of old photos of the first families that lived here and how the Palos Verdes estates, families, how they got together and they had their dances and they had their horse rides and so forth. And then eventually in the 50s, of course, the rest of the peninsula was pretty much settled, and development came in leaps and bounds and subdivisions and all that stuff. But the early days were really fun to read about. Okay, let's go on and explore this a little further. Right, we stopped here just to discuss the somewhat pitiful condition of these plants. As you well know, our past winter, we only got generally about 2 inches of rain instead of our normal about 15. And our vegetation on the peninsula does show that. We've had some rain since, but it's not quite enough. But as you can see, the bush sunflowers are trying to sprout out. And if we get a little bit more rain in another month or two, they're going to recover and come out. But right now, they look really dreadful. But that's California, a Mediterranean climate for you, and it will happen. And hopefully we're not in this extended drought, which the experts are telling us will happen here. That would be very sad. So I'm planning on having a wet winter and having all our vegetation resprout, so I don't have to stand here and talk about dead bushes. What seems to be doing extremely well is the tumbleweed, which is this. It is blooming, and you can look at it closely. It has cute little pink flowers. Unfortunately, of course, it's a very bad invader, called also Russian thistle. It is thought that the seeds most likely came in the 1800s or earlier with bedding of immigrants, because in the old days, as you all know, they had straw in their mattresses, and you don't really have to particularly clean that of seeds or anything like that. You just fill the mattress. And so it's most likely that it came there, and of course now it's spread all over America. And even though it is romanticized in cowboy movies, tumbling along, and we even have songs about it, it's kind of a dastardly weed. It has thorns. It spreads its seeds by when the seeds are ready. The plant itself is on a very small root ball. If I would take this off, it's just a small connections to the root. And what the plant does, it disconnects the whole bush when the time is ripe for the seeds to seed themselves, and the wind will tumble it along, and while it's doing that, it's spreading all these seeds nicely all over the place, and that's the reason why it is so prolific. And we have it all over, and that's one of the things that the Palos Verdes Land Conservancy, when we restore land, that we get rid of. If at all possible, it's kind of a a hard job, but then there's other things we need to get rid of also. I'm sure you're aware that the Palos Verdes Land Conservancy, of course, stands for preserving open space, and we have succeeded in, what should I say, prompt the city of Rancho Palos Verdes to apply for funds and so forth, so that over the years we have now managed to preserve over 1,000 acres of open space. The most recent purchase, and I don't know how many of you follow these things in the local newspapers, in the Breeze or in the Peninsula News, was the purchase of the 400-acre Portuguese Bend Preserve, which is basically the slide area. And by virtue of this ancient slide, which was actually recorded on old maps, geological maps for a long time, it's been there for a long time, but it was dormant. And at one time, developers from LA County, because at that time we were not a city, our PVE was not a city, thought that they could develop it, and they put houses on it, which promptly started sliding, and the county of LA was sued for $10 million and to reimburse these homeowners. But by virtue of this landslide, this space is still open, and by now it would probably be covered in mansions, because of course, as you all know, the view is superb over to Catalina and so forth. And that was always in our viewfinder to get that open space, and but we are a conservancy. We only buy from a willing seller, so we had to wait till the owners were willing to give it up for a fair price, which the government agencies will assess. It's nothing that we do. They tell us this is what it's worth, and then we try to give the owners money, and that's how we operate. There's still 200 acres left. Some of it, you may know, it's a property that is right next west of Wayfarers Chapel, and you can see it's relatively flat, and some of it is buildable. The rest is in a building moratorium area because it edges the Abalone Cove slide. We're hoping that the developer one day will decide that yes, it would be okay for us to get the city of RPV to buy that, and we can then apply for bond monies that the public in California votes for open space or parks or playgrounds or whatever, we vote for the environment. Then entities like ours can apply for a sizable chunk of that money and say, look, we would like to purchase this. And this is how the Conservancy goes about purchasing open space for all of us in perpetuity. And that makes it really nice, but it's hard work. So we need everybody's support, and like everybody else, we're a grassroots organization and appreciate membership, but also these walks are free to the public because anyway, we hope that you keep your eyes open to our doings and what we're doing and restoring. It will be in the papers. It's a slow process. Sometimes people get frustrated and say, well, what are they doing? This looks like a terrible weed patch, and they're not doing anything. But it takes time, and so you need to follow the proceedings when they're written up, or when we send out newsletters, or you check our website and see how we're doing, because initially when you get, particularly Portuguese Bend now, 400 acres, it's going to be a long process. We're going to have to get rid of the weeds first and the non-native plants, and that takes a while to get rid of those, and then it needs to be replanted, and it'll take a while for them to grow because the plants are little. But in 20 years we should have an absolutely fabulous preserve. And the money that we get from the resource agency requires us to restore 5 acres a year. That's mandatory. Of course, we would like to restore more, but it's a matter of funding. And so we're plodding along, and we're one of the first areas that we're going to do is below RPV City Hall. Does everybody know where that is? It's near the Salvation Army. It's called Upper Point Vicente. So in other words, it's up PV Drive from the lighthouse, that area. And there's a lot of plowing has been going on, but the hill parts are very well vegetated in our major area for the gnatcatcher, for the California gnatcatcher, which is a bird that is threatened or endangered, and so needs to be protected. And they're there, and they're breeding there. But the flat areas, like many places on the peninsula, were farmed at one time. And so that's a good start. We can don't have to do that much.